Hey there, and welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, getting ready to go over the main slate for Friday, December 13th. We have a nice 7-game slate on tap, and it could be a lot of fun. Some injuries to monitor for sure. We have no LeBron James. We already know that also, but I'm going to walk you through it, getting an early start on it so I can get it out there so you can get your process going, and hopefully I can nudge you in a direction that you weren't already thinking of. Yesterday, Taylor and I did a video together for the NBA slate. We definitely had some good calls. We talked up Sabonis as an interesting tournament play at low ownership. He certainly was low owned, and he went bananas. So if you followed that advice and played a lot of those Boston guys, then you probably were on your way to cashing. So yeah, hopefully that helped you out. If this helps you out in any way and you like free advice, smash that like button. If we get to 30 likes, I'll try to do a Saturday main slate for NBA video tomorrow. And then also subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribing already, you're just bypassing free advice and missing out on some of the videos we do. We do NFL main slate. We do NFL showdown slates. We do NBA every day. Sometimes I'll do a weekend video for NBA, but it's just we walk through it and we give some analysis. We look at the ownership, we look at the projections and the matchups, and we try to highlight plays that maybe not everybody's talking about or in on. And the goal is to give you a tournament edge. If you want just straight up picks, or you want the cash game plays that everybody's going to play, that's not really what this is about. It's kind of strategically looking at the slate and trying to find out the best way to approach it and maybe get different. I'll still absolutely highlight the flat out guys that look really good on the slate, but then I'll also offer my opinion as to which guys might be worth fading or being underweight on, and which guys are being maybe overlooked that look really good. So let's get into it because it is a small-ish slate. I mean, 7 games is 7 games. That's a 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. Even better. I'm gonna go team by team. I like to do that a little bit, especially when I'm going solo here, just because it's a little bit more digestible and you can look at all the options instead of maybe missing over some guys. So let's do it. We got Wizards and Cavs for the first game. This game has a nice 232 total. So if it stays close, this game could be absolute fire. I'm not super confident it will. Obviously, there's a 17-point spread, so neither is Vegas. I mean, going into it logically, I don't have a lot of interest in this game. But anytime you have the Cavs in a really good spot and you think the game could stay close, we have to have a little bit of interest in it. That said, in a vacuum, Jordan Poole does not look that appealing at 7.3K on the road against the Cavs. It's not a friendly matchup at all. If you think the game is going to stay close, though, then you can start entertaining Poole just because we know he has a massive ceiling. A few games ago, we talked about him against Denver, and we said kind of the same thing. Like, if you're paying for Jokic and any of these other guys like Westbrook or whoever it was at the time, we said, well, you should think about Jordan Poole on the other side, run it back, maybe do a mini stack with Wizards guys. And sure enough, he had 58 fantasy points. So that strategy is not always going to work out. My guess is it will not work out today, but he's not going to be owned. And if the game does stay close, Jordan Poole is probably going to smash. So keep that in mind if you have interest in playing Cavs guys. And, outside of the blowout risk, I don't see why you wouldn't have some interest because it's a really good spot. Either way, blowout aside, JV looks really good at 5.5K. If he is going to start again, he's been absolutely smashing. There's really no reason not to like JV, because as long as he starts, he's going to play 20 to 25 minutes, even if the game blows out. He's had 42 and 51 fantasy points in his last 2 games. He can get a double-double and get you there at this price point in 3 quarters. So he's going to be needed one way or another because the Cavs do have size. I will note that Evan Mobley's questionable for this game. So if Evan Mobley misses, it will be interesting to see what they do with the starting lineup because maybe he wouldn't be needed quite as much. Maybe they just start Alexander Sarr and maybe JV comes off the bench, or vice versa. So just keep an eye on starting lineups for sure. I would need JV to start personally to take the dive. Right now, he's pulling ownership about 25%. That makes sense. As long as everything stays how it is and he starts, I like him quite a bit. He's easily my favorite Wizards play of the day, and I would ignore the blowout risk for him if I'm paying down at center. Champagny has been really good for the Wizards lately. He's projected for big minutes. Obviously, they are in a total rebuild, so a lot of their younger guys will be a priority. He feels blowout proof, and he's done well. So I like him as a value at 4.5K. Only problem is he's going to be pretty chalky. So anytime you have a really chalky play, you can at least consider the reasoning to not play them. And in this case, it would be that the Cavs on the road are not a friendly matchup. So even if he did still play 34 minutes, it's very possible Champagny just absolutely sucks tonight. That said, not a ton of value like standing out right now as I'm doing this. So he looks good at 4.5K. I have no problem getting to him whatsoever. Ownership be damned. And again, if you think this game's going to stay close, Alexander Sarr, Koulibaly, Carrington, those guys all look fine. They all project for about 30 minutes. If the game stays close, they'd only play more. And the projections are okay. And they're not projected to be owned. So all those guys are in play. I think we can also look at Marvin Bagley and Jared Butler, depending how you feel about the game and depending what the lineups are. Like if Bagley ends up starting at 4K, he looks fine. And if you think it's going to blow out, I think Jared Butler at 3.7K is a fine value that would probably get a little bit more run than expected. I'm approaching this as if it's not going to be a close game and the Wizards are going to struggle because that's what should happen. But if you want to play it from a tournament angle, you would be interested in Jordan Poole and Koulibaly and Sarr probably. On the other side, the Cavs just look good here. They're at home. They're a good team. The Wizards are an amazing matchup. Donovan Mitchell's usually my favorite play at 8.9K. He's a little bit too cheap when you consider the matchup in his ceiling. Solid projection, not going to be super owned at 15%. I don't think you don't have to do run backs with the Wizards if you're only going to play one or two Cavs. But if you're going to load them up here, you certainly should consider that. Evan Mobley is questionable. If he's out, that would boost the usage for Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. It would also make Jarrett Allen look a lot better. Jarrett Allen looks good anyways at that 6.8K price against the Wizards. No problem with him. Don't feel like I have to play him though, as things stand. If Evan Mobley's out, I would be really, really interested in Jarrett Allen though at that price. Darius Garland is kind of like in no man's land. The price is fine. The matchup's really good. The projection just doesn't really blow me away. So if I'm going to play a expensive Cavs option without knowing the Evan Mobley news, it's going to be Donovan Mitchell. As far as value goes, I think Karis LeVert, just decent usage off the bench. Not a huge role, but I think if we can get 25 minutes out of him off the bench against the Wizards, and of course, if the game blows out, I think he's interesting. I don't have a problem with him at all at 4.7K. And you're not really going to carry much ownership. I would keep an eye on the Evan Mobley thing. If he's out, we can look at Niang or Dean Wade, whoever gets the start. They're both pretty cheap. I would have a lean towards Niang, but if either of them start, I think they would be viable punts. All right, on we go to the Pacers. They face the Sixers in Philly. This game is a 226.5 total. Not bad. But the Pacers only have a 110 implied total, and they are projected to lose, or the 6-point spread with Philly favored. So I don't really like targeting teams on the road in Philly when Joel Embiid is healthy. They have PJ13 back as well. So the Sixers should be at full strength as far as, just across the board, really. But mostly of what I'd be fearing is their defensive aptitude here would be at its highest point. So it's not a great spot for the Sixers. Tyrese Halliburton's price at 8.6K is all right. Projection doesn't blow me away. The only real perk here is that he's not going to be owned. He does have a ceiling. So unowned Tyrese Halliburton on a 6-game slate is somewhat appealing. Just not a priority for me. He doesn't really stand out. Same thing with Siakam. Miles Turner's price is okay. It's come up a little bit. I just don't really love any of these guys in this spot. Siakam and Turner kind of clashing with Embiid down low. That's not very inviting. I would really only chase the Pacers guys if you're stacking this game or if you're loading up on Philly guys, maybe one or two runbacks. Just nobody really stands out. I think if I had to play a Pacer, it'd probably be Andrew Nembhard. Just going to take a quick look at his minutes to make sure he's not like super limited. 31 minutes last game, 22 the minute before. So he looks ramped back up. Not always the best per minute guy. He hasn't really been productive since returning from injury, but I like those minutes at that 4.3K price. The matchup stinks, but I think that's good value. I think that's a solid value that we can try and feel reasonably confident in. Obi Toppin's been really good off the bench. The 4.6K price isn't something I'm super interested in, though. TJ McConnell is always in play when he's around 5K or cheaper. 5.2K is fine. I think Andrew Nembhard is just the top Pacers play here. And the 17% ownership reflects that. The other guys I wouldn't rule them out. Halliburton, Siakam, and Turner, just not priorities. And Benedict Mathurin is priced out for me at 7.3K with Nembhard back. All right, so the Sixers, they are in the way better spot at home against the Pacers. This is a much friendlier matchup for them. Joel Embiid looks awesome. He looks like the top spend of the entire slate. He's not having the best projection, but we know he has a massive ceiling. He projects extremely well, and he's way too cheap at 9.5K. The matchup with the Pacers is really good. There's just nothing bad here except for the fact that he's not going to play massive minutes. But if we can get 32 to 35 minutes out of Joel Embiid, I will be perfectly content with that. And we just know that he's super efficient, easy, clear path to a double-double, and just a really big ceiling in a good spot. So I love him here. I think when it comes to Embiid, it's just going to come down to what's your interest level in, going up $2,000 for Anthony Davis or $3,000 for Nikola Jokic. I kind of say, why not both? Like, my current plan is to pay for Embiid and one of those other centers. And depending on how many lineups I'm going to do, just kind of like rotate, like play Embiid and then rotate Jokic and Davis in a lot of my lineups, because I think there's just way too much upside at the center position on this slate. And then, obviously some lineups I would also probably go Embiid and JV if JV starts, that kind of thing too. But it's tough because the center is loaded on this slate and looks really, really good from a top level. But that said, whatever you want to do with Jokic and the brow is up to you. Embiid looks awesome. Dollar for dollar, he is my favorite stud on the slate. Tyrese Maxey at 8.8K with PG-13 and Embiid there is a full fade for me. Just the matchup is good. For tournaments, he could get there. He's not going to be owned, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, Maxey can always pop off for like 50 real points. You just never know. But it's just, for this slate, it's not something I want to do. I think Paul George at $800 cheaper. Similar minutes, similar projection, the same matchup. Obviously, he's the better try, but I think if you're going to play a sixer up top, it's 100% going to be Embiid on this slate. And I like the minutes for Kelly Oubre, and the price at 5.5K is all right. I think if you're hard up for value and you're kind of in that 5 to 5K, 5.5K range, he's okay. I don't mind landing on him, just not a priority. None of the other Philly value really stands out. Jared McCain is a good player. He should have a role with some usage off the bench, but at 6.2K, that is out of play for me. All right, Hornets and Bulls looks like a really good game. It has a 230 total, only a 6-point spread. Very interesting. The only problem is it's really tough to know with any confidence where to go in this game besides one or two spots. Brandon Miller projects well, really good matchup, massive usage. The only problem is he's 9K, so it's hard. It's kind of like when Franz Wagner's price spiked up, and like all of a sudden Franz Wagner was like 9.5K every slate. Still a very good play, nothing wrong with them. Just not really a priority at that price when there's other guys too. So I think especially with center so loaded, I would much rather invest my funds in guys that have way better floors and way better ceilings than Brandon Miller. That said, Brandon Miller is 9K for a reason. He has a really big role and he's in a really good spot. So if you land on Miller, I do not have a problem with him whatsoever. Nick Richards is a decent per minute guy in a good spot against the Bulls at 5.8K. I think he's all right. I just don't love the projected minutes. But if you land on him, that's okay. I think I just prefer JV though if I'm going to be in that range. I'm not sacrificing the upside at center across the board to like pair JV and Nick Richards though. I definitely want at least one of Embiid, Jokic, or Brow on this slate. So Richards is just going to be the odd man out for me personally. Vasilij Micic, I mean, if you go look at his game log, this guy is so frustrating because the one game he sucked in his last 5, I played him. He got 19 minutes. He didn't play the fourth quarter in that game. Every other game in that stretch, he's had 34 plus minutes and 29 plus fantasy points. So surely the second I vouch for him again, he's going to tank tonight. But the minutes have been there. The production has been there. The usage is there. And the Bulls are one of the best matchups you can ask for. I'm going to lock in Micic at 5.1K all day. I'm not going to think twice about it. Of course, there is the presence of Cody Martin at 5.3K. There's also KJ Simpson, who kind of ate into his workload in that one game I was talking about. And there's also Miles Bridges, who I think is questionable. Let me check his status real quick. He's questionable. So if Miles Bridges returns, that would cut into Micic's usage for sure. That said, Micic looks good. Nothing really should deter us from that based on everything we've been seeing and everything that's in front of us. So I like him a lot. He is probably going to be a core play for me unless some other crazy value opens up. If you want to leverage that owner, because he's going to be chalky. So if you want to leverage that, you could entertain the idea of Cody Martin at 5.3K, especially if Bridges remains out. He's had 33 plus minutes in each of his last two games. So he also has that same matchup. He's a similar price. He is quite an interesting pivot for sure. in tournaments. He's not going to garner any ownership because of his minutes, and fantasy point projection is, they're not super inviting. The other value, like Josh Green at 4.6K, he's going to get minutes, but he is super, super volatile. And if Miles Bridges returns, I'd have zero interest in him. I really don't want to play him anyways because he can play 35 minutes and get you like 5 fantasy points. The floor is very, very low. All right. For the Bulls, Vooch looks fine at 8.5K. Solid projection. Really good matchup. He is questionable, though. So if he is out, I guess we can look at value via Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith at 3.5K. I would imagine he would be a candidate to start. If he does at 3.5K, he'd be very interesting. Unfortunately, he is not power forward eligible. So again, you'd have to sacrifice some of that upside at center if you want to play him, or you'd have to drop down from JV or Nick Richards, which I would certainly entertain if Jalen Smith ends up starting and Vooch is out. At Vooch's price point, I would much rather pay $1,000 more to get Embiid. He just feels like, he's just a way better play. Obviously, Vooch is in a really, really good spot, though. So I think in tournaments, Vooch would be pretty appealing. But as things stand, I'm not on him. If he is out, Zach LaVine and Kobe White would look pretty darn good. I would probably favor LaVine just because he has a higher ceiling, but Kobe White at 6.9K would also be in play. Also keep an eye on the status of Josh Giddey, who's also questionable. If he is out, LaVine and Kobe White would look even better. And then you could also entertain the idea of Ayo Dosunmu at 6.4K. Excuse me. At 6.4K. But I mean, he's priced up to the point now where you're basically paying for that 67-point fantasy outing he had like 3 games ago. So I don't know. I mean, the minutes are there. The matchup is good. I think Ayo is in play, but at that price, I think I'm not going to go there, especially with Lonzo Ball still existing. I can't really do Lonzo Ball 4.1K just because his minutes are capped, but it is a good matchup, and he is cheap. So, and nobody's going to own him. So I think he's not the worst punt just because he is an efficient player who does get a lot of points per minute. But yeah, not somebody we can feel super, super good about. All right, Brooklyn at Memphis. They're 11-point dogs. This game looks gross. I mean, Cam Johnson is 7K with a really nice roll and a pretty good projection. I think, though, he's coming in with 25% ownership. Based on the ownership, I think that's a fade for me. Like, I like Cam Johnson's role, and I like his ceiling. He's had some really good games. The projection's really nice, but the Grizzlies are actually really good at defending the 3, and this game projects to be a blowout. And just in general, Memphis is good defensively. So I would not be shocked if Cam Johnson is a chalky bust here at all. Dennis Schroeder at 7.7 is way priced out of range for me with Ben Simmons active. I think if Ben Simmons were to randomly be ruled out, Schroeder would be in play, but he's just really expensive in a really bad spot. I just don't want to do it. Nick Claxton, his minutes are kind of capped. I think he's an okay value at 5.9K, but again, I'd just rather drop down to JV. Ben Simmons at 5.4, it's a big no thanks. Dorian Finney-Smith at 4.8K is a decent value based off of minutes. Not a great per minute guy, but if he's going to be out there playing 30-plus minutes, I think we can definitely consider him at that price. Not really interested in any of the other Brooklyn value unless somebody is randomly ruled out. And then if so, we can look at Keon Johnson or Jalen Wilson, but I'm doubting that we're even going to need to care about that. On the other side, the Grizzlies are kind of have their minutes pretty tight, and in general, there's also the blowout risk. So John Morant is fine as a tournament option at 8.7K, but I just don't see him getting big minutes. And if this game also might blow out, I just don't want to invest funds in somebody who isn't really possessing like a reliable ceiling. Same with Jaren Jackson Jr., really good price. He's been smashing in limited minutes. Like his last game, I think he had like 40 fantasy points in 17 minutes or something crazy. Let me double check. 36 fantasy points in 17 minutes. Obviously, he can get there on threes and blocks and rebounds and everything. He can deal with foul trouble though too. I think at 7.6 against the Nets, he's in play for sure. But it's not a priority. And I think given his foul trouble issues and the blowout risk and other options on this slate that I want to pay for, just not a guy that I feel like I have to go get. If I was going to pay for a Memphis stud, it's going to be Desmond Bane. Just way too cheap at 6.7K. Just with the decreased price, and the solid projection and the good matchup, I think you can ignore the minutes cap for him, but a lot more so than you can for Morant or JJJ. Santi Aldama is okay at 5.6. Then you have punts like Brandon Clark and Marcus Smart at 4.3 and 4.6K. I think if I'm going to go value for the Grizz, it would be Marcus Smart at 4.6. Brandon Clark is shaping up to be kind of chalky at 4.3. I don't feel the need to go do that. He is fine if you want to eat that chalk. Same with Aldama. I think if I was going to eat one of them as chalk, it would be Clark because the 1.3K price difference, but I'm not super giddy to do either. This is obviously a spot also where I wouldn't be super shocked for the Grizzlies to rest some of their guys. So just keep an eye on Jalen Wells and Scottie Pippen Jr. and even Jake LaRavia if that ends up happening. Lakers and Wolves, we already know that LeBron is out. Austin Reeves is questionable. If Austin Reeves is in, he looks really good at 6.3K, not currently carrying ownership. It is a tough matchup against the Wolves on the road, but Minnesota is not quite as, it's not quite the same defense as they were last year. So I like Reeves a lot in terms of usage with no LeBron if he's in. Whether Reeves is in or out, D'Lo looks really good at 6.1. The price has come up. Excuse me. Battling a cold forever and always. When I played D'Lo 2 slates in a row, he did not top 20 fantasy points. The first slate I don't play him, he got 60 fantasy points. So we know D'Lo has a ceiling. With no LeBron, he is in play at 6.1K, 100%. And if Reeves were to be out, he would look like a smash. He'd be a core play for sure. Rui Hachimura and Dalton Connect, they're gonna get solid minutes with no LeBron. They both look good at 5.5 and 5.1K. I think Rui is a little bit safer, but I like Dalton Connect more because he's not going to be nearly as owned, and he just has a higher ceiling with no LeBron there. And we can look at punts here for the Lakers, like Max Christie, Gabe Vincent, Cam Reddish, just because if Reeves is out, they'll all get way more minutes, and they're going to get a little bit of a boost with LeBron out anyways. Do I feel good about any of those three guys? No, I don't. And I don't see them as priorities whatsoever. But if Reeves is out, I would be a little bit more interested in them. All right, on the Timberwolves side, they obviously have a way better matchup than the Lakers do. And, Anthony Edwards, not super expensive at 9.2K, solid projection at 45 fantasy points, not going to be mega owned. I think he's an interesting pivot off of some of the higher up studs, same price range as Joel Embiid, not that much more than John Morant and Donovan Mitchell. So if some of those guys end up pulling like major ownership, I think he's an interesting pivot. I don't mind him whatsoever. For whatever reason, he struggled against the Lakers, 31 fantasy points per game in 2 meetings with them this year. I think that's not something we need to put much stock in, especially with no LeBron in there too. So I think he's fine. I think he's an interesting tournament play, but just not a priority for me. Julius Randle at 7.9K, decent price, not a great projection. I guess he's got revenge on the brain against one of his former teams, but I just don't see him as a priority. Rudy Gobert would be somebody I'd a little bit more interested. I'd be more interested in getting to at his price point. Does not project amazingly. Has not been very good on the year, but he will be needed against Anthony Davis. So there's that. I think he's an okay play. I just, where I'm going personally at center on this slate, I just don't see how I'm going to get to him. Mike Conley is a solid value at 4.7K. No problem getting to him. Just doesn't have a massive ceiling. Naz Reid at 4.6 off the bench. Good usage. Could be needed a little bit more going up against the Brow. So he's fine if you're short on value, and he's forward eligible too. So that's nice. Jaden McDaniels, I mean, if you want to play guys that are going to get minutes, you can look at McDaniels at 4K flat. He's going to get about 32 minutes in this game. Solid matchup. Not the worst value in the world, just not really historically a great per minute guy. And then you have DiVincenzo and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 3.9 and 3.8K. Both going to get 20 plus minutes off the bench. Decent usage off the bench. But I kind of need Mike Conley to be out to feel good about either of those guys. I think they're okay based off their prices on this slate, though. All right, last game of the night, we got the Clippers and the Nuggets. This one is a 7-point spread. Denver is favored at home. If it stays close, this could be a really good game, though. Harden looks really, really good. Sub 10K price, 46-point fantasy projection. We know he has a massive role. He's actually done very well in this spot against Denver on the year. He has averaged 63 fantasy points per game across 2 meetings, just putting up 31 points and 13 assists per game. So he looks really good, especially if he's not going to be super owned. And right now, that looks to be the case. It is going to be tough, again, to get away from the centers on this slate. But if you want to do that, I think Harden is an interesting way to close this slate out. Zubac at 7.4K is just okay. I think Zubac is fine. He'll be needed against Jokic. I think he's actually done well in this matchup too. Let's see. Yeah, he's done okay. 36 fantasy points per game across 2 meetings. Like, he'll be needed. He'll be out there. He can always get double-double pretty easily. Jokic is not the friendliest matchup, and obviously Jokic can kind of soak up a lot of the rebounds and stuff too. So I think it's a low ceiling spot for Zubac, but he in general is a guy with a solid floor, so I don't hate him. I just don't see him as a priority on this slate. One guy that could be a priority as far as like lower mid-range goes is Norm Powell. Decent price at 6.3K for 6.3K for a guy with pretty good usage rate with no Kawhi Leonard. He's back playing big minutes, 35 minutes in the last game. He's scored 23 plus real points in 3 of his last 4 games. He had 43 fantasy points 2 games ago, 31 plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. So he's very scoring dependent. He needs to pop off as a scorer to really hit, but at that price, I think we can take that risk. He is going to be owned though, so if you want to take a chance on Powell not getting there as a scorer, I don't think it's the worst thing if he's going to be that owned. 31%, that is pretty chalky for that price point for a guy who kind of needs to score like 25 to 30 real points to deliver. KGP and Chris Dunn, pretty similar price, pretty similar projection, pretty similar minute projection. I think they're both fine. Amir Coffey kind of in the same range. I think, based off of price and everything, I think Amir Coffey probably feels the best, but they all have low floors. They all lack like an amazing ceiling. I think they're all in play because they're all going to get minutes. And I think Terrence Mann remains out too. Yeah, Derek Jones Jr. and Terrence Mann are both out. So they're all going to get run. So I think you could use more than one of them. I think if I was going to use one, I'd use Amir Coffey. KPJ probably has the best ceiling, but Coffey has he's projecting for more minutes, and the actual fantasy projection's not that far off, and he's the lowest owned, projected to be the lowest owned of that trio. That probably is going to do it for me for the Clippers. All right, let's wrap things up with the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic looks amazing, coming in with the best projection of the entire slate and only at 18%. So I'm definitely interested in him at 12.5K. I will say though, Zubac is not like the funnest matchup either. So if you want to bank on like really, really expensive Jokic busting, relative to a poor Jokic outing, it's not the worst idea. Jokic is very expensive, and the matchup is not amazing, but he's averaged 67 fantasy points per game across 2 minutes with the Clippers, and he has been insanely on fire lately. 72 plus fantasy points in 4 straight games, 69 plus fantasy points in 5 straight games, 85 and 90 in his last 2 games. So I don't think I can bypass him. He feels like, the Russell Westbrook of yesteryear. He is just in God mode right now. So he looks like a really, really good play, especially if he's not going to be chalky. The only question is there enough value to get Jokic comfortably to the point where it's not super restrictive and we actually like our lineups? That would be the question. And like I said, Anthony Davis still exists. Joel Embiid still exists. There are other tourney options that we should be considering, whether it be Donovan Mitchell or Anthony Edwards or, any of these other guys that we talked about. What's the other guy that, Vooch if he's in. So these kind of guys, I don't know. Right now, especially with the ownership where it's at, I want to go get Jokic. And I think Anthony Davis might end up being the odd guy out for me, and I would rather attack the Lakers with their cheaper options. So Michael Porter Jr. at 7.1K is okay if Jamal Murray's out. I wouldn't make him a priority either way, but if Jamal Murray's out, I think he's got a good usage rate, and he'll be involved, and he's fine. I just don't think I'll get there. I'd rather just drop down and eat the Norm Powell chalk than pay for MPJ at this point. Jamal Murray, if he's in, is too expensive at 7.8K just because he's been like in and out of the lineup. He's been nicked up. It's also not the best matchup in the world. Interesting tournament play, I guess, if he wouldn't be limited, but not somebody I really feel like I have to go play. If I'm not playing Jokic, and even if I am, a 5.5K Aaron Gordon looks really good. It looks like one of the better values of the slate. He's going to carry ownership, but I don't really care. Christian Brown at 5.7K. Like, it's the same thing like when we talk about the Knicks. Like, the Knicks guys get like, 35 to 40 minutes. And even though they don't project well, we always have to talk about them because they're going to be on the floor a ton. And if you're on the floor a ton, eventually you're going to see spikes in numbers and you can deliver. So Brown is very interesting because of that reason. He plays a ton of the game. He's not owned. And he's not that expensive considering. So he looks really good. If Jamal Murray is out, he looks even better. If Jamal Murray's in, I am out on Russell Westbrook at 6.3K. But if Jamal Murray is not playing today, Russell Westbrook would be a smash, and you would see his projection and ownership and all that spike considerably, and he would not be too expensive at 6.3K. He would still look really, really good because he's been good when Murray has been out. I would need somebody random to be out to consider Peyton Watson or any of the other values. The only other value for Denver I would like is Julian Strother at 4K flat. I think he's okay no matter what if he can push 20 minutes off the bench. But I would probably need Jamal Murray to be out to feel, reasonably good about him. All right, so that does it for the, game by game or team by team breakdown here. Overall, like looking where ownership is at, I love the idea of letting everybody else eat Anthony Davis chalk, hit the Lakers value like Connect, D'Lo, Reeves, and then attack this slate with the other two stud centers on the slate. Embiid has the third best projection in the slate and is going to be less owned than Anthony Davis. Jokic has the best projection in the slate, is going to be less owned than Anthony Davis. The only issue here at all for me is going to be tying my funds up in, a really expensive Jokic and a pretty expensive secondary option in Embiid. Ownership wise, though, this is very appealing. It creates leverage on the Anthony Davis ownership. And honestly, I'm paid 1.5K less for Embiid over Brow when I think Embiid's projection is kind of low. Like, I think he can smash here for sure. So if you're only looking at Embiid versus Davis, I'm picking Embiid today. And if you're only looking at Jokic versus Davis, I think I'm going Jokic too. So my personal strategy is probably going to be pairing Embiid and Jokic in a lot of my lineups. I do still want to have a lot of lineups where I get to JV if he's starting. But overall, I think pairing Embiid and Jokic is going to get me different. And then also, obviously, it naturally fades Anthony Davis. So that plays into that as well. And I was talking about those values that they look too good to ignore. Champagny does look good. Keep an eye on the Fuchsia stats for Jalen Smith. Micic, I'm just going to eat it at 5.1K. And then there's just a lot of guard value, and plus the Lakers guys I said that I think that can kind of take care of any of those other lingering questions for us. All right, so keep an eye on the injury status. Obviously, Evan Mobley and Vooch are probably the two biggest ones. We already know LeBron is out, and there's going to be a random injury that comes in and just changes the slate. That's the way it is. But hopefully, everything I laid out helps you make some decisions and helps you build some winning lineups tonight. If it did help, please smash that like button. Also, consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.